This is Bill McBirnie, and there is truth to this one. Radioregent is #1 for independent artists. Check levels right there.
Guys, you should dance when this thing is going. Good afternoon, Mr. Bill McBirnie.
Hi, Anthony.
Welcome to Radioregent. Good afternoon.
Oh, I'm very glad to be here.
My name is Curtis Anthony. Some call me Anthony Curtis. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you on the Koolbreeze Experience Show.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about your evolution,
Yeah.
your vision, your mission of your music. But before we get into that,
Okay.
what is a normal day outside of music for you?
Well, now it is actually all music.
All music.
Oh, yeah. You know, a lot of it is practicing because I'm a bit of a practiceaholic.
Okay.
So I spend several hours a day just practicing.
Wow.
And or rehearsing or working stuff for. I freelance a lot.
Okay.
So that means I'm always working somebody else's book.
Right.
I'm not that often a leader, really.
Okay.
So I always have to learn everybody else's music.
Okay.
So that keeps me busy. So
Right on.
rehearsals, gigs, practicing,
Mhm.
and that's largely it. You know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great, great. So tell me, where did your love and passion come from for the music, and who or what influenced your style as a musician?
That's a really big question. Well, I guess I grew up in a small town, and my parents both liked music. My mom liked classical music,
Okay.
and my father liked jazz.
Right.
There was never any sort of conflict. It was just a difference in taste. But what it meant is that I heard both when I was growing up.
Right.
So,
What town was this?
oh, the town is Port Colborne, Ontario.
Okay.
So it's pretty small.
Okay.
But anyway, I guess I was hearing Bach from a very early age, and then whatever my dad happened to be listening to, which would be some of it was a little softer jazz, but there would be a lot of Miles Davis and players and Horace Silver,
Right.
and Ramsey Lewis and Les McCann. It was a fair mix of jazz stuff, but I got interested in both things.
Right.
And then of course I grew up in the '60s with the Beatles and the Stones. I mean, that was a really rich era.
It was. It
for
really
both,
was.
for both pop, rock, and jazz as well.
Right.
So I was lucky, and I got interested in the flute at a relatively early age, but I was basically a classical guy.
Classic. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a lot of. Yeah,
So
go ahead.
you have those the balance with music, with jazz, and the classical background. That's a very
Definitely.
rich and a lot of depth there.
Definitely. You were asking about influences. I mean, there are really a lot, but probably the first ones I would cite are Bach, John Coltrane,
Yes.
and Miles Davis.
Heavy
And
hitters.
those, I mean, they're kind of obvious, but those are the major ones. And on flute, there are a lot that are sort of perhaps obvious, but one that's perhaps not so obvious is Paul Horn. I always loved.
Canadian.
Well, actually, Paul Horn was American. He was born in New York City, and he eventually became a very successful studio musician on the West Coast.
Okay.
And I knew him as sort of like a jazz player.
Okay.
And then some years later, there's a whole story behind his Taj Mahal recording.
Okay.
Because I liked his stuff all pre-Taj Mahal.
All
Now,
right.
mind you, I like Taj Mahal as well.
Right.
The so-called inside recording. But the reason you associate him with Canada is because he lived here in the latter years of his life in Victoria.
Okay.
But anyway, Paul Horn was a big influence. And he's not necessarily like the strongest player.
Yeah.
But the odd thing is that he affected me both as a jazz musician and as a classical musician.
Right.
So at the end of the day, Paul Horn has probably been the biggest influence of anybody.
Wow.
Beyond, even Sir James Galway or
Wow.
or Herbie Mann or Hubert Laws.
Yeah, there was.
Paul Horn is the guy.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Wow. Tell me, I'm wondering, is there a time when you and your instrument are alone, and tell us about that intimacy.
Well, it didn't start that way. I'll tell you, I was really wrestling with it because when I was a kid, I asked for a flute. I was young, and what I meant was a recorder. I just didn't know what it was called. So my father went to the trouble to find a teacher, round up an instrument, and they came over to the house and they opened up the case, and I saw this thing, and it was in pieces to start with.
Okay.
It was metal.
Right.
It had keys, and I thought, oh my God, there must be some serious mistake here. This is not what I asked for.
Right.
Because I really just wanted a whistle to horse around or toy with.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they put it together, and then they were trying to get me to blow it, and then you had to blow it off to the side.
Oh.
Everything about it was wrong,
okay.
from my standpoint. It was just completely wrong. So I was pretty surprised and disappointed and shocked.
Right.
But my father was a very imposing presence. You didn't mess with him. So I realized, wait a second, okay, he went to the trouble of finding this for me and purchasing it. So I better start to practice it.
Right.
So I started to play it, and that was really like a duck to water. Even I was surprised. I took to it right away.
Wow.
And no one could stop me from practicing. I mean, so I connected with the instrument very, very, very quickly, and that's never really left me. It's always the same when I pick it up.
Right.
Yeah.
I know everybody's definition is different.
Mm-hmm.
What is your definition of musical success?
I like to think that music is worth something to people.
Right.
And so from my standpoint, especially as a sort of professional musician, I really would like to earn a living at it.
Right.
But it's difficult.
Right.
That's the reality today.
Okay.
And it's become more difficult over time.
Right.
So even for me, it's a partial living at best. It's not a full living. But rather than bemoan that fact that we all have to deal with as musicians, certainly, for me it's just playing the best I can.
Right.
Every situation and opportunity.
Right.
And I really like to improvise, so I like, and I have a relatively inside sense of music. I don't do a lot of sort of free music. I like to play in sort of diatonic situations.
Right.
So it's bebop, Latin, Brazilian, funk, smooth jazz, although people don't often associate me with that, because I sort of come from a jazz tradition.
Right.
When I made that transition from classical to jazz.
Okay.
But in any event, what I like to do is improvise.
Right.
And if I can, get the listener's attention as an improviser, that to me that's the biggest success. And it doesn't matter whom, really. I mean, I don't really try and play for musicians.
Right.
I like their response, but I really like an audience response.
Okay.
And some of the gigs I do now, I work with a fellow, George Martin, who's a very good piano player, but he cultivates the seniors, residents, and veterans hall sort of market. So it's all very, very old audiences, and he plays very, very old repertoire. Of course,
Okay.
he's smart.
Right.
And it's interesting playing some of these tunes because some of them I know from the sound of them, but I've never had an opportunity to play them.
Right.
So I get to play these old tunes. But in any event, playing for these old folks is fantastic. And
Right.
these are gigs of, in effect, no consequence. I mean, it's not Kerner Hall.
Right. Right.
But they're really, really important, and I really like, and you can reach them. I mean, I'm sort of a younger cat, but there are funny things that you can do when you're playing. Like, for example, in an old folks' home, doing very old repertoire, American songbook stuff from sometimes as far back as say the 30s. They don't really care if you can bebop or not.
Right.
They really don't care about your technique. They don't care about any of that stuff. So, for example, I sort of change hats and I go, oh, okay, well, it's more a a Lester Young, Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins kind of vibe. So you play a little simpler, and of course they connect with that better,
Right,
Because
right.
it's sort of their vintage,
Right.
And odd little tricks like they'll know the tunes, right? So
Mhm.
some of them might start to sing. So somebody's in the front row and I can hear them, start to match the phrasing. And it's just a way of pulling them in. They're little tricks that makes it really, really worthwhile for playing for these folks. And as I say, the gigs are sort of unimportant and they go unrecognized, but to me, they're really important.
Right, you get that gratification from
Right.
that. Right.
Yeah.
I've got to ask you, is there something in your musical journey that keeps you humble?
Well, I try and listen to really, really good music, so that keeps me humble. And as I say, those targets like Bach, Coltrane, and Miles Davis, they will keep anybody humble.
That's for sure.
That's
The creme de la creme.
Right. I don't. I work on focusing on people like that. I ran into a flute player recently who's actually like a sort of like a new music player. So everything she does is pretty out there,
Right.
off the wall, completely.
Mhm.
But she is amazing, Claire Chase. And she was here in Toronto a few weeks ago, and I got to see her live at Buddies in Bad Time. It was a very small venue.
Right.
She was doing Kerr Hall a couple of weeks later. I couldn't make that gig.
Right.
But in any event, I saw her at Buddies in Bad Times, and it was just a one-man show, as it were.
Right.
And that was unbelievable. That's one of the most amazing musical things I have ever seen
Right.
on any instrument.
Right.
And the fellow I was with, Jamie Thompson, a fellow classical flute player in Toronto, both of us are at intermission just coming out and having a smoke and shaking our heads. And I said, that is absolutely humbling
Right.
to see somebody play that well. She was fantastic.
Wow.
Claire Chase is her name.
Claire Chase.
She moves in a completely different musical circle, but whenever I hear things like that, it's always very, very inspiring. And I'm not afraid to admit that is, that's really fantastic.
For those of us who just tuning in, Bill McBirnie is in the studio on the Koolbreeze Experience on a beautiful Saturday, October 29th.
Yeah. Weather's still good.
Yes, yes.
It's a nice day.
Yes.
Yeah.
You came from a hardcore jazz standard background, right?
Well, earlier in my life, like growing up and through high school, it was very classical oriented.
Okay.
I was listening to jazz and sort of sometimes trying to play with the records, but I was very lost and I had no guidance, and I really didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
So the classical thing was much more sort of important. It took more of my time, and I developed a pretty good sound and technique even early when I was in high school.
Okay.
And my teacher at the time, Robert Aiken, who was with the Toronto Symphony, I finally came to lessons to Toronto in grade 9 or 10, and he sat me down one day and was sort of encouraging me to go into a career in classical performance. So I was a serious flute player, but when I finished high school, I digressed into another field and occupation entirely, which is what I did most of my life. But I started to pick up the flute after university again, and I started on classical stuff, and then I realized I really want to improvise. I don't want to be reading music like this anymore. It was just a sort of a choice I made, because it wasn't a preference for one over the other. And when I decided that I wanted to improvise, well, the people around me, you improvise playing jazz, and a lot of the players were bebop players.
Okay.
Or they were cutting their teeth on bebop. So that's the transition I made.
All right.
From classical to essentially sort of bebop tradition. And yeah, and that's how I got into improvising, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got to ask you,
Yeah.
for the fans out there who
Yeah.
are curious, what is jazz?
Well, if you want to look at it kind of narrowly, I mean, the first thing that is important to me as a jazz musician is being able to improvise, getting that opportunity to actually improvise. And I guess the second thing, and as I say, this is why it's a little, that's a fairly broad definition, but more narrowly, it's swing. And I mean, that's the heart of jazz, it's swing. We have all sorts of other evolutions, and a lot of it's say even eighths, fusion or what have you, but swing is the source of it. So I mean, I really like to go back to the progenitors, which means Buster Young, Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins,
Giants.
Louis Armstrong. Like don't like a lot of the old cats, and I've heard some like Great Big Spiderback. I mean, there's things that kids don't listen to. They might know the names, but could they recognize their work? Did they know them well enough to understand it and hear it?
Quite true.
I love that stuff, and actually through Cuban music, when I worked with Memo Acevedo, and I had to learn something about Cuban music. The folkloric stuff was very critical. The Cuban rumba, R-U-M-B-A. It's not the
other one.
Yeah, exactly. This is like a hardcore African-derived rumba, and I learned a lot from that about both swing and the so-called even eight stuff. And people don't understand, like especially in Latin music, that if you listen to those rumba bands, that's a source of everything. Everything, including the way they play the 6/8. That's where the swing figure comes from. It's not just. It's got its own clave, but people tend to look at the clave in isolation, and actually that's a source of a lot of things, including the swing clave for American music.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway,
I gotta ask you, what does being a jazz musician mean?
For me, or. It comes back to the definition. It's just those occasions or opportunities to improvise. That's really what I like to do. And I play a fair amount of jazz, and people often, like a lot of my acoustic jazz recordings are very swing oriented and very, I don't do many original tunes. It's a lot of covers of standard jazz repertoire, and it's very, very often swing oriented. Not entirely. I always have some Latin or Brazilian things, but on this instrument, it's associated with Latin music. So I've had to learn that stuff.
Right.
But as long as I'm improvising, I'm happy.
Right.
So I don't care whether it's jazz, Latin, like Cuban, Brazilian, pop, rock, hip hop. Smooth jazz. As long as I get an opportunity to improvise, I'm cool. Because if they want somebody to read the chart, they're classical players that can do that fine.
Right.
And I can do that too.
Right.
And I will do a certain amount of it. But if there's no blowing on the gig, then I'm really, there's no point in my being there.
Exactly. I gotta ask you,
Okay.
Bill. How do you bring yourself to a high place when you perform?
I don't know if I necessarily think in quite those exalted terms. Really what I try and do is find the groove with the musicians around me, and try and make them comfortable.
Right.
And when it's happening, and you never know when that's going to be, it's weird because you're sort of connected and disconnected all at once.
Right.
So it's a very unusual space.
Right.
And it is a little like Nirvana or something.
Yes.
But that may be the best way I can describe it. It's really just trying to find the groove and connect with the other players, and then sort of see where it goes.
Right.
And try and get to that moment of peace or understanding or something.
Yeah. I gotta ask you, this is a jazz term. Can you explain the Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organization?
Okay. I have to laugh because that is a funny question. I mean, it really is funny, Anthony.
I read it in a jazz book by Joachim Berendt many years ago.
I have to laugh because the first thing I have to admit is, one, I've read it. It's by George Russell.
That's right.
So the funny thing is, I have read that. I'm as a jazz musician, I'm a little bit untutored and unschooled, and I've never been bound by a curriculum.
Right.
And as I get older, I try and look at things in very, very, very simple terms, and simpler as I progress. So anyway, when I was younger, I was trying to ready myself for jazz and improvising, which meant I did do some self-study and read things, and this is one of the things I read.
Right.
Okay, now here's the story.
Okay.
It's, I don't know if you know Mulgrew Miller,
Yes.
who's a great,
An amazing
great
pianist.
Exactly.
Oh, love him. Oh.
Great guy. One of the sort of young lions
Yes.
with Art Blakey.
Right.
Fantastic player and a fantastic musician, fantastic guy. And I used to hang with him whenever he came to town. We'd always go out and club after his gigs. And trying to think, because there's a couple of things that come to mind about Mulgrew, because he passed away a couple of years ago.
Yes.
After the second stroke is a sad thing. But anyway, we were walking into the Rex, and at that point I was reading I was reading that book.
Right.
And I had it under my arm. And Mulgrew says, what are you, you're reading it? And he says, oh, Bill. He says, oh, Bill, there's a lot simpler ways to look at all of that stuff. And I was learning that, and I said, oh, I think I see what you're saying, Mulgrew. You know, it takes a little while. Everyone goes through their same process.
Right.
But it was just funny for Mulgrew Miller to make this comment on a classic theory book by George Russell, and basically say something like, oh, there's a lot simpler ways to look at that. And he's absolutely right, because I read the book. But I might as well just round that off with I saw a Mulgrew Miller clinic on YouTube, I think. And you know, the students, they're always asking tons of questions. And remember what I was saying about trying to make things simple?
Yes.
The thing that stuck out with Mulgrew, and it really resonated with me, because this is in fact what I did when I was learning jazz myself.
Right.
And I'll explain in a moment.
Okay.
He says this, like they're asking all these questions, he's explaining all this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know what you really have to do? You have to find a lick that you really like, and just make it your own.
Wow.
Now, that sounds
That's
a little
profound.
Exactly.
It is.
It sounds a little simple and you know, sort of almost trivial, but that's really how it works. Because I know when I was learning, I would take a swing figure and just loop it and play it over and over again to try and get it to sit right. And so I know what he's saying. And then the thing is, you learn from that, and then you template it, bang, and you start to generalize. So from the Lydian chromatic concept, there's quite the commentary. Anyhow,
I just thought I had to throw that on you. And,
well, I was sort of ready for it in a funny way. Real life prepared me.
Wow,
for
you're
it.
prepared. Wow.
But the funny thing is, I actually read the book, and it's not an easy read.
I know. I said today I'm going to nail a jazz man to the floor.
Well, you didn't entirely succeed.
Bill, I'm going to throw some names out there.
Okay.
And I'll explain after.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan, Lennon and McCartney, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, Bob Marley, Gamble and Huff, Holland, Dozier Holland, Rod Temperton, Leonard Cohen, Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, the Gershwins, Robert Johnson, James Brown, Carole King, Jerry Goffin, Hank Williams, and Joni Mitchell. Some of the greatest composers who ever put pen to paper.
Yeah.
Loved that music when I was coming up till today.
Yeah.
And then some of the stuff I'm hearing today on mainstream, it's appalling. Today's music from all genres, I admit you have to look hard and deep into the subterranean trenches to extract that good stuff. There's a lot of benign mediocrity out there. What's with the music market?
I'm with you entirely on that, and that sort of corroborates a feeling or a point that I made earlier about when I was growing up and when I was listening to music as a child of the '60s. I especially realize it now how lucky I was, how good that music all around.
We were blessed.
Absolutely, and I don't get that sensation from a lot of today's music.
No.
It's very unfortunate. There's often a formula attached to it, a common sound. Now, mind you, they may say that about bebop,
but at least bebop can play.
But actually, there's a lot of variation within that genre. But in any event, I sort of wonder why that is. some of it has to do with like attention span.
Yeah.
Kids don't work as hard learning stuff, or they're not challenged as much. Computers sometimes make things a little easy. I think social media is very distracting. So what I find, like even to my own girls, I tried to introduce them to everything.
Right.
So they never took to jazz, but at least they know who John Coltrane and Miles Davis are.
Precisely.
And they've heard them.
Right.
So at least they have
That's a step.
some kind of awareness. But what's interesting, the girls, they're really, really sharp, really fast with their wits.
Right.
And they can multitask and all sorts of things. But it's a sort of a different mindset.
Yeah.
I'm very analog,
Right.
in part because I'm a generation
Same here.
or two removed. And they're very quick. But I think sometimes they even gravitate towards what I regard as more superficial music or less profound.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's hard to find
Really is.
good music. I sort of enjoy it, and I can appreciate it. But for only limited intervals, I sort of get the idea very quickly, and I want to move on. It's like people who like actually beatboxing on the flute, for example. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It's a very percussive approach to the instrument, and it's sort of taking over non-classical flute playing. I refuse to do it, but I find beatboxing is very impressive, and there are guys that are excellent. Like I guess Greg Patillo is the main exponent, and he is really good at it.
Right.
No doubt about it. Plus, he does it in an acoustic manner. A lot of people that were starting to beatbox on the flute, I think they relied heavily on a mic for the effects. But Greg Patillo can just stand back and generate the result acoustically. So he's really, really good at it.
Right.
But the only thing is, I really don't want to hear much of that.
I know.
I've sort of got the idea, and I want to move on.
Wow. You know.
And a lot of music is sort of like that. So I hear you loud and clear.
Right. And one of the things that I guess rubs a lot of us the wrong way. When you get a guy going down in the basement, cuts a CD in an afternoon, comes back, makes $30 million a week.
That's kind of painful.
Yes, and he's jumping around with the sexiest girls with $5,000 bottle of champagne pouring on them, and here you are with your craft trying to master and bring it to a very, very high level of creativity, and these guys are just with a beat and barely anything put into it, and his name is on a Billboard chart.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's got to be.
But some of that, one of my major inspirations, I've already mentioned his name a couple of times, is, Lester Young was, like, I still listen to tons of Lester Young.
Same here.
It's weird, because I never tire of his music, and there's something, I don't really play like Lester Young, I don't try to play like Lester Young, and in a sense, why would I do that? Because you can always say, oh, that's here and gone now.
Yeah.
It's but when I listen to him, I get something soulful or something about what music is all about. I hear that in Lester, and I go, okay, that's what I want.
Yeah.
To however I play, sort of try and bring out that spirit.
Yeah. To me, those cats, they were saying something.
Yeah.
And it was on such a high level, and it still stands there today.
Right.
And
but the funny thing too, Anthony, is they weren't necessarily trying to be that hip. They were just. This is what another reason why I like Louis Armstrong. They are sort of entertaining. They know that it's important to relate to the audience, to connect with the people, and to play in a way that you do that.
Right.
Because younger players often today they sound very crafted. They know what they're doing.
Right.
Good technique, good ideas in a way. But after a while, they've worked the theory too much, in my view, and it gets a little. It sounds studied.
Yes.
Yes. And it's lost that spontaneity somehow. So I appreciate the craft and the study, but the only thing is, it sounds that way.
It's not coming from the soul.
Right.
Yeah, and with the older cats, it was
that's all they had really, because they were
mind,
discovering
body, and soul.
themselves. Yeah, they were discovering themselves. They didn't know what a +11 was. Who cares? They were just, oh, that sounds kind of neat. Boom. That's the you want to keep that aspect of the music alive, that little sense of awe and wonder, without getting too sophisticated to the point where the audience is sort of scratching their head, wondering what's going on here.
While we were on that topic, I remember I saw a documentary and I read some stuff on the great Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
What grade did he reach in high school? He did probably reach 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And his horn his phrasings
Oh,
that influence horn,
Everybody.
and trumpets and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And Miles David went to Juilliard for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And he said, I walked out of that place and I went to University of Charlie Parker.
I believe him, because you know something.
Yeah.
When I was learning, I mean, that's one of the tricks I was doing was I transcribed tons of stuff.
Yeah.
I never transcribed any Charlie Parker because they had that so-called omnibook. So I learned about a third of the bird solos in that book. I didn't finish all of them, but I must have done at least a third of the solos in that book.
Right.
And what I do is I treat them as a little like classical etudes.
Right.
So the first thing I would do is, like, you'd have to learn the notes.
Yeah.
And sometimes there were a lot of notes. So it takes you a while to learn the notes.
Right.
And then to get it up to speed with the metronome so you can sort of cover it. And then the last stage was getting the record, getting to spin, and then play it and match everything.
Wow.
So I did a lot of Charlie Parker through the Omnibook and his records.
Yeah.
So I understand Miles completely.
Yeah, and Charlie Parker had some complex phrasing and dexterity. Donna Lee, which Jaco Pastorius played on bass.
Right, exactly. Jack Wall, yeah.
Who could have thought this man could do something like this?
Oh,
And so beautiful.
Yep.
And these great jazz, I still honor them and respect what they do. I have a lot of their music, and they put music on a very high level today.
Definitely, yeah.
Like it's unsurpassed.
But the other nice thing about somebody like Charlie Parker, who sounds kind of busy and complex, the fact of the matter is he's very melodic, so people connect with it.
Yes.
So there may be sophistication there and complexity, but somehow it's delivered in a way that it's going to connect. And he's very, very melodic. And actually, I did when I was turning my attention to jazz, I studied a little bit with Frank Falco, because when I started, the people I was trying to play with at my brother's sessions, they were cutting their teeth on this stuff, and I was trying to play, and I didn't know where to begin. I was just completely lost.
Right.
So I went to Frank, and he sort of walked me through the basic vertical and harmonic, or vertical and horizontal. How does that work? I'm mildly dyslexic, but
Vertical,
you know, the harmony and,
yes.
and the scalar relationships, and we looked at a few things. But I remember, I think at that point I was probably working on those Charlie Parker solos from the Omnibook, and Frank was looking at them one day, and he says, "You should, this thing is, everyone thinks Charlie Parker is so busy and so complex, and here his solos are scripted, laid out." And I'm trying to play them. He says, "Look at it. This is, if you add up all the rests and the sustained tones for all, even in a medium tempo or high tempo tune, where it sounds so frantic and busy, he says, look at that. There's a good 20 to 25% of the time that there's no motion."
Wow.
So that was a very interesting point,
right.
And I learned from that too. It's a good musical principle.
Right.
You don't have to be making noise all the time in order to achieve a good musical result. In fact, if you look at a guy like Charlie Parker, where you get that sensation, it's just not. That's not how he works.
Yeah.
So he's relaxing for a good 20 to 25% of the time. You just don't realize it. Yeah.
Wow.
So and you can actually see
well
that.
put.
You don't have to listen to. You just have to look at the page and see it and go, "Oh, exactly this one."
And I got to tell you, I remember the days when I first got a jazz documentary on VHS.
Right.
I treasure that thing.
Right.
I hid it in a box and pull it out every so often and put it away.
Yeah.
And now at the record store, you can get those beautiful remastered documentary of Coleman Hawkins, Dexter Gordon, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Don Coltrane.
Right.
And it's something to treasure.
Definitely.
And you really get to learn how these guys operate.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I got to ask you, how does a musician monetize intellectual property in a manner where the artist gets paid fairly?
There is no way to do it anymore, I don't think. Okay. I don't think there is. I mean, as an indie musician, this is punishing. It really is sad. The internet has really done a lot of damage. I mean, even with my girls, when they were growing up, they would be file sharing, and I as a musician,
Right.
trying to finance record releases,
Right.
costs a lot of money for me to do that. I have to pay the musicians, do the recording, the studio, the engineers, the mechanical rights to the other publishers, the artwork, the manufacturing. I mean, just tons of expenses.
Wow.
So I used to try and explain to them, you know, when you do that, the artist is not getting anything, and you have to think about what you're doing. Is that fair?
Sure.
There was no stopping it. You know, that was it's a thing in the generation.
Wow.
So it's it's hard to say a good word on that, because as an indie musician, you are crucified. It's I mean, even the last release I did, which was with Bruce Jones, and we did that on a shoestring, thank God.
Right.
Maybe my last one, because it's just uneconomical to be doing this anymore.
Okay.
And it's a TIMA winner. It's had excellent reviews. Grain of Sand, it's called. It's just the two of us doing a lot of Brazilian world beat type
Right.
things. But CD baby sales after a year and a half, I mean, they might be $300 or $350, just to give you some idea.
Wow.
That's everything: CDs, downloads, streaming. So, does it make sense to make this and pay all? That's what I'm saying.
Yes, yes. I hear you.
It's-
I hear you. Did you ever envision, after all these years in the music business, you'll be where you're at today?
Absolutely not. I mean, as I said, when I started with the flute, I wanted a recorder to play with,
Right.
literally toy around with, and I got a flute where I had to learn how to play it. And actually, that was a good thing for me, because I learned very early in life. I took an interest in something, a really deep, profound interest in something very early in life, and something that was demanding, that I had to focus on.
Right.
So I learned a lot from that. That really helped me out. But also, some of these people that I might have that I later come to see in Toronto or learn about worldwide. I mean, for example, Sir James Galway.
Great
I mean,
musician.
I never thought
Mhm.
he would be tracking me down.
Wow.
Because I'm the so-called jazz, what's it called, resident jazz flute specialist on his website.
Okay.
And when he was in Toronto here for the first time in decades at Kerner Hall, I played with him. And here are kind of buddies. But that's the kind of thing, like when you're a kid growing up, you never think that's ever going to happen.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You know, this music business has been such a crazy, such a beautiful thing, but has turned into some kind of a ball of madness.
I think this is going to ultimately impact on the quality of music too, and that
Yeah.
explains. Remember we were talking about how music is getting a little sort of superficial.
Yes.
Well, I think the economics is breeding this superficiality, because nobody has the time, the energy, or the prepared to make the commitment necessary to make really
Right.
interesting and meaningful music. They're trying to catch attention,
Right.
and that's where it stops.
Right. I embrace the idea that there's a new demystification process going on between artist and audience.
Yeah.
I think when you look back, say, at the last decade or so, there's not one single entity, artist, or group that has personified, because of the brand name of the 2000, the subgroups, genres, hip hop, girl power coming into a communal type of thing.
Yeah.
In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they had Presley, they had Hendrix,
Yeah.
they had the Beatles,
Exactly,
they had
yeah.
Bob Dylan, they had James Brown. Because the point of having somebody who led the forces has disappeared,
Yeah.
because the cavalry of rock is too well known, is a currency that is not devoid of meaning anymore,
Yeah.
only a convey of rebellion, and the internet has taken on.
Mhm.
Music, it's like, wow, I'm just blown away. Thank goodness for the jazz that sort of keeps me, and the blues,
Yeah, going
and some of
on.
that soul
That's
music, and
universal, right,
yeah,
exactly.
and the classic rock, and the
You know,
pop.
I practice, and I divide my time. I practice. My practice regimen has evolved over the years, and actually, all my practice consists of now is playing with records. I don't do scales. I don't do long tones. I don't do etudes. I don't do exercise. I just play with records.
Right.
But I do sort of apportion my time. So a quarter to a third is going to be soul and R&B, which
Okay.
is interesting.
Right.
You know, as
Right.
a hardcore jazz musician,
Right.
I spent a lot of time with Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin,
Mhm.
Etta James, you know, that kind of Marvin Gaye, that whole thing.
Mhm.
I was going to say something about that last comment. I can't remember which one it was. It was about music. Here, I'll let you ask the next question.
Okay,
You'll come back
alright,
to
no
me,
problem. We'll come
Anthony,
out.
yeah.
We'll come back to you. Tell the fans, where can your music be purchased?
Well, I always appreciate if somebody asks me for a CD on the gig,
Okay.
and I have a special pricing policy.
Yeah. All right.
It always works like this.
Okay.
Okay, it's 1 for 20,
Mhm.
2 for 30,
Mhm.
and 3 for nothing. And at the end of the gig, I always end up with no CDs and no money, and I wonder why. So I got to work on that pricing policy. Okay, so one is it's always appreciated to buy a CD, a hard
Yes,
copy on the gig.
yes,
But
yes.
of course, on the net,
Mhm.
I'm with CD Baby,
Mhm.
and CD Baby aggregates with everybody. You
Okay,
know,
right.
Rhapsody, Spotify,
Mhm.
CD Universe,
Sure.
everybody, including iTunes. So of course, iTunes, I'm available there too.
Right.
And I'm not that hard to track down because McBirnie can be misspelled any number of ways.
Right, right.
But Extreme Flute can't.
Okay. I like
So,
that.
so that's one of the reasons why my website, for example, is just www.extremeflute.com, because that way it's sort of catchy and easy to remember, and it's very difficult to misspell.
Can you tell the fans, Bill McBirnie, where are you playing next?
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I've come off a fairly busy string of gigs. You know something, Anthony? I always have to look at my gig book because
Sure.
my memory is
Yeah.
shot. But
I had printed it out.
oh, you did?
I did
Because
print.
it's on my website.
Uh-huh.
What was I doing?
It's I remember I had printed it out and I don't remember.
Yeah, I had a bunch of gigs that were good. The Salty Dog, Mazzetta.
Aye.
I was with Willie Jarvis at the
Okay.
Gasworks in Hamilton.
Uh-huh.
I was at the Rillieux Jazz Festival with Joe Huron,
Okay.
with Bernie Sminsky and the Mo Kaufman Tribute Band, the Church of Incarnation.
All right.
But what's coming up is I'm actually in a bit of a hiatus right now.
Okay. Well,
So
you,
rather than
you send me that
rather-
information.
No, but hang on.
Okay, sorry.
I'm going to answer
Okay.
just be patient. I'm going to get there. I keep my eye on the ball, even though I digress. But anyway, what I was going to say is, rather than playing, I'm actually going to be listening tonight. So I'm going to hear Robbie Botosh and Kenny Barron
Wow.
at Carter Hall. So that's
a
sold out.
gig. That's
So
a
I've
gig.
got a date with my twin brother on that one.
Right.
So as I say, I'm on the other side of the fence for a while. But
Okay.
at the end of November,
Uh-huh.
when is it? November 20? Is there anything else going on? November 25th, I'm in Ottawa.
Ottawa, okay.
And playing with an excellent little trio there.
Mm.
Rennie Lavoie and Tim Bednar and Norm Globe at La Cine Nouvelle.
Okay.
And I'm also, that's in the evening, and then in the afternoon I'm going to be doing a clinic at Carleton University
Okay.
on sort of improvisation. Flute players I know will come up, but I like to, it's going to be an improvisation-oriented thing.
Right.
And actually next week I have, they called me, what is it, November 10th? Jazz FM wants me to go in and do what they call, it's a little like this, Anthony, but a
Okay.
much shorter version. It's
Okay.
called One Mic, One Chair.
One mic, one chair.
And
okay.
what they do is they have me in there with my instrument,
Right.
and I play something, and then they interview me.
Right.
We've been spinning tracks, but they actually want me to bring in, and I'm all by myself.
Okay.
So what I thought I'd do is bring in the alto flute, which is sort of interesting because
Nice.
it's a nice sonority.
Nice.
So that's Jazz FM 91 at 3 o'clock
Okay.
on Thursday, November 10th.
Mm-hmm.
And then my website has always got a current gig listing, which is
right.
www.extremeflute.com.
Okay, great. So, when all is said and done with
Yeah.
music, how would you like to be remembered?
Having, I guess, played a few good solos that connected with people.
Right.
And actually, I think I've already done that.
Okay.
So I can go anytime.
Okay. Oh, you look a little too young. You look a little too young for that.
Oh, well, what's also interesting is, I mean, like this last album that I did with Bruce Jones, he was the first guy I did a record with, and he's also been the last guy, and I've done about 5 in between.
Right.
But the funny thing about Bruce and I is, like, we can generate stuff forever.
Right.
Like, so it's funny. We have an album, but it's like, well, that's not the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think that's a good piece of work, and
Right.
We could do more. But
Right. Right.
that's what it is for now, and that may be all there is. But that's cool.
Yeah. Where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on Twitter.
Twitter.
But I don't do too much more than that. I'm actually perhaps a little more active on Facebook than Twitter.
Okay.
And the reason being that I don't like it to cut into my practice schedule, and you can sort of waste a lot of time on social media. So I like to sort of contain it.
Uh-huh.
But those are the main areas.
Okay.
I think is there anything else? No, that's about it. Yeah.
Do you have any shout out to friends, family, band members you want to plug in there?
Well, I don't think my wife is listening because she's up north with the girls.
Okay.
But of course, she means the most to me. Svetlana.
Okay.
So that's I'm almost going to stop there because that's everyone comes after her.
Right. Okay.
Her and the girls.
Fair
Anna
enough.
and Dennis, Anna and Elisa. Yeah.
Right, right. Bruce, Bill McBirnie, thank you for stopping by Radio Regent on the Koolbreeze Experience Show. Come see us again. Thanks for bringing your love to our city and Radio Regent broadcast facilities, which manifest in our greatness.
No, I really appreciate the opportunity here, Anthony, and
Thank
it's an
you.
excellent radio station. I've heard you've spun some really good tracks that I didn't even know about today, so I appreciate that. I also appreciate you indulging my long-winded answers.
Thank you. We're going to get back to the music
Okay, exactly.
and so on.
Yeah.
And all right, that was great, man. That was great.
How long were we on there for?
For 45 minutes.
Okay, good. So you're within your